OK, bonjour, bienvenue à tous et à toutes à la présentation de comment préparer une proposition de recherche gagnante. Alors, j'espère que vous avez assisté à l'autre séance sur les bourses, les grandes bourses provinciales et fédérales. Et puis maintenant, ça c'est la deuxième séance dans la série pour savoir comment est-ce qu'on créer la proposition de recherche qui est un élément très important de ces demandes. Et pour commencer, je m'appelle Carly. Je travaille au bureau de la recherche et l'innovation à Glendon. Et ça, c'est un de mes travaux. Je travaille aussi avec les étudiants après les séances pour travailler la proposition de recherche dans un format individuel. So one-on-one support for the research proposal after today's presentation. So I want to start off by just going through the logistics of the CGSM application. It is a bit confusing. There is a research portal and a CCV portal, and then how we would go about requesting references. Then I'll go over the parts of the application, again, with most of the focus on the research proposal and sometimes spent on the bibliography and the summary of proposal. Then we have a very special guest who's here today. We have Deirdre, and she is a recipient of the CGSM scholarship. And I worked closely with Deirdre last year. So she's here to answer all of your questions about the scholarship and what the process is like. And then if we have time, but I don't unfortunately think we will, there are some exercises that I want to look over on. How do you create a research space? How do you create a research proposal? We are going to look at some examples and some kind of worksheets about how to go about this. Okay, le portail de recherche. Je vais cliquer ici pour... Est-ce que tout le monde peut voir l'écran encore? Est-ce que quelqu'un peut juste me signaler par... OK, oui, merci. Alors, voici le portail de recherche. Et ce qu'il a à faire, c'est de créer un compte de recherche avec votre courriel, tu as un mot de passe. C'est assez facile. New here, create account. Je vais sign in. And I just want to show you what it looks like. So you're going to open the Canada Graduate Scholarships Master's Program because I've already started this, but one step before when you create the account is to actually select that you are applying for the Canada Graduate Master's Program. Je vois qu'il y a une question. On voit seulement le PowerPoint. Okay, thank you. Then I'm going to stop share and I will reshare. Okay. Est-ce qu'on voit le portail de recherche maintenant? Quelqu'un peut indiquer? Okay, oui, merci. Okay, super. So now you'll see, I can go back to the last one. So you'll go to the research portal page here. You'll put in your credentials, but if you haven't created an account, you will inevitably create an account. And then I'm just going to sign in with my credentials. And you always have to click on the application that you've selected. So if you're applying to a master's program, you're going to want to apply to the Canada Graduate Scholarship Master's Program. And that's done in this research portal. And you're going to open it. And you will see, first of all, that they tell you how many days until the deadline, right? And then you're going to go here, and these are the parts of the application, right? And as you can see, I haven't submitted any of the parts. And it's pretty straightforward. You can go into each part. And sorry, you're going to click edit. And if my internet cooperates, right? So it's pretty straightforward. You just fill out all of the information required, where you're applying, and then you would save and move to the next. And this is the summary of proposal, right? This is the sort of abstract of the research proposal. So not the research proposal itself, but the abstract. And then we'll just go through. And here we go. I just wanted to show you what it looks like. I'm going to go back to the application overview. Just so we can click around here, I want you just to get sort of familiar. And sort of, so the summary of the proposal is different from the outline of the proposed research. And we're going to go into detail about what the differences are between the two. But you're going to upload the outline of proposed research as an attachment from your computer, and it will have to follow specific formatting guidelines. You will also have to put in your transcript, right? And again, it's an attachment, and you will have to request these well in advance of the deadline for the CGSM. And then the Canadian Commons CV, which we spoke briefly about last session, but we are going to go over next. But you will attach this as well, again, in a PDF format. Remember, export applications and attachments to PDF, they must be in PDF format, and they must follow the presentation guidelines that I will go over with you shortly. And then the invitations. So I think I mentioned this last time, but in case I didn't, the references, there will be invitations sent to your reference for them to submit it, right? The reference, you will not see the reference itself. So this is the way you invite the references. And again, you do that by clicking manage invitations. And I sent one to myself because I will show you what that looks like. So I'm just going to go back here. And again, if you click on each part, right, it's pretty straightforward. And then you get a new, this is where you would upload it. And then you get a pin from your CV, I believe. Should we go over, is this helpful to see what it looks like inside of here? Just to get you kind of oriented with the machine that is the CGSM application. I don't know if this is helpful just to see what's going on. Do they send the confirmation number by email? Sorry, do they send the are you talking about the invitations for the references? Is that what you're mentioning? Or are you talking about the CVV?
I think in the last page that you were showing the CV, it had like a little thing when you went to like upload a new CV that said, please enter a confirmation number.
Oh, okay. Yes. Do you want to talk about that, Deirdre? Because I feel like I don't know as much about the actual PIN status of the CVV.
To be completely honest, I don't remember.
Okay, you don't remember. Okay.
So it's like there's going to be instructions on everything.
Yes.
So
here, is this helpful if we look at the instructions right now?
Maybe
see the instructions.
I mean, personally, for me, I found like the online part of this all quite straightforward. Like once you got into it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember this, like exactly what I did, but also that tells me that I didn't have any issues with it because like nothing went wrong.
That's helpful. Like, I think that's reassuring to hear. The CV. Okay, yeah. So if you go, so this is the proper link now, instructions for completing a Canadian Commons CV. So registering and logging in, selecting the CGSM. So I actually wanted to go over this because I created a portal myself for this as well. So let's see if I got a pin. There's all this editing and adding, confirming, submitting. So I guess once you submit it, you'll get a pin. Yes, here it is. Your CV has been submitted. The confirmation number is this. So that is the number that you would put in here. Okay, thank you. Yes. So now, that problem solved. So yeah, basically the goal of this is just to show you and maybe to reinforce what Deirdre said, which is it's not that straightforward. It is straightforward. It's not that complicated to manage all of these elements. It's just that there are a lot of elements, right? There are the references, the transcripts, the outline of proposed research, the summary, and then all of the kind of personal information and activity details. I'm going to stop this for now, or I'm going to stop this for a moment, and I'm just going to see where we are in the PowerPoint. Yeah. Okay, and I will reshare. So again, this is sort of what I just showed you, right? All the different elements, and I always put the links in the PowerPoint to the appropriate links to what's being mentioned on the slide in both English and French. So this is what I was talking about the formatting instructions and attachment standards. So here they are. Again, this is just something to know and to kind of make sure is correct, that you have this done correctly before submitting your application, right? So Times New Roman font, correct margins, justified paragraphs, etc. So this is something we went over in the last session, but I think it's pretty obvious that there are different opportunities to demonstrate your talent, right? To show that you are a candidate that you are a strong candidate and that you are ready to win the CGSM grant. And these are the spots where you can do that, right? And they're kind of all evaluated, from what I understand, not separately, but globally, right? Because if you remember, I don't have it here, but I don't know if you remember, I can show you, is the breakdown of the way of the categories, right? So these are the things you will be submitting, but there are categories through which you are being evaluated. And some of the categories are applicable to these documents in different ways, right? Does that make sense? Just the idea that you're submitting all of this, but it's not a matter of like checking off certain boxes, but it's kind of all working globally together to achieve the goal of getting the scholarship, the bursary. And I guess I'm trying to represent that by showing this this visual, right? This visual is about the proposed research, so the research proposal itself, and how there are many different elements of the proposal to consider. But it kind of goes back to this idea here that all these documents are working together, just like there's different parts of the research proposal that's all working together for the one goal. Does that make sense? If there are questions now, I think that would be a good time to ask if you need some clarification. And Deirdre, you can jump in whenever you want. We can make this more informal today.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about whatever or answer any questions. I think in terms of just like this slide and the last one, I think what Carly's trying to say is that oh, something's on my screen. Anyway, basically there's these three things that you upload transcripts, your CV, and then your proposal. And then the way that you're evaluated, there's basically different like weights designated to each of those things. So your transcripts are actually like your academic achievement, I guess, is actually weighted quite highly, whereas the proposal itself is, I guess in my opinion, like I was a little surprised to see how they're weighted, and
yeah, I was
that they
too.
put a little bit more emphasis on like academic achievements and like stuff like that compared to the proposal itself. But Actually, that one thing that was really like almost dissuasive for me. Like I was almost hesitant to apply because there were a few years in my undergrad where I didn't do like amazing, and I knew like a lot of other people from school who were applying to this the same thing who I just felt were like so much more academically successful than me. So I would just like to say, if that's like if you're maybe thinking that that's a reason that you shouldn't apply, don't. Your grades are probably a lot better than you think they are. You're probably too harsh on yourself, and ultimately it's a good experience and you should apply regardless.
Yeah, totally. I think that's something we talked about last time too, was the idea of the benefit of applying regardless if you're going to win or not, right? It's just a good exercise to get your ideas down on paper, to practice writing a research proposal, to flesh out your own ideas, right? And I kind of want to start talking about the process of doing that. And again, just feel free to jump in whenever. I think it's helpful to have someone like you who was successful in this process and has firsthand experience going through it to just provide their 2 cents. So I'm happy for you to interrupt me whenever.
Okay.
So I think one thing that was helpful for me to think of, and when I was helping folks, is there are these 4 different pockets to think about, right? Like who's reading it, right? What is the purpose of the research proposal? How do we structure it? And what is the style? And I think a lot of folks got really hung up on style, right? Because, you know, talking about the weight and the way it's evaluated and what the documents are that you're, you know, submitting, you see that as Deirdre points out, like academic excellence does have such a heavy weight. So how can I incorporate that even in the research proposal? Is there room to say, you know, I was a research assistant in this field and that's what sparked my interest, and oh, I did XYZ tasks and they led me to this discovery. At times there is room for that, right? There is the room to have that cover letter element. There is the room sort of to reflect on your own experiences. And it's not reflective just on your own experiences, but reflective on the academic aspect as well. Like, what is the value of the research that I'm putting forward? I'm going to show you, and that sort of goes to purpose as well. That's why they're all interconnected, right? It's in reflecting on the academic value, you get into the purpose and the impact of your research as well. And keep in mind that the committees that are going to be reading over your work are going to be multidisciplinary. So that means that your research is not being viewed necessarily only by experts in your field. So your proposal needs to be written in simple and plain language for folks to understand, which at times can be more challenging. And then we're going to go over structure as well. We're going to go over all 4 of these in a bit more detail. Okay, so again, like I said, who is going to read your proposal? And you need to consider the reader. So then let's think about clear language. It needs to be engaging. So how do we draw in the reader in a way that is relevant and in a way that isn't like in your grade 12 essays that you would write in high school, you know, since the beginning of time, or you get a Webster's dictionary definition of some term that you're using, right? Like that's kind of too broad. You want to contextualize it, but you also want it to be engaging, right? So by having it be clear and engaging, then it would be automatically intelligible to a non-specialist reader. Any questions so far? And anything to add as well? You can just shake your head if nothing.
I think one thing to add on like the clear and engaging, and this is something I really struggled with in my proposal, was like how to, because my topic was quite specific, and a little bit, I guess, like a bit of a niche topic. Like it isn't something that's super commonly discussed. So I really struggled with explaining it enough that someone who didn't know anything about what I was talking about would understand my proposal, and not having my proposal be 800 pages long. So just, I think what worked for me, I guess ended up working, is that my like opening statement was a very clear definition of like the issue that I was trying to address and why it's extremely important. So start with something that doesn't necessarily have to be like the history of your topic or anything like that. You can get really like right to the point about what exactly it is you want to talk about and why it's so important that you do this research. And I think that's like should be a recurring theme throughout your proposal, is demonstrating just like what you want to do, how you're going to do it, and why it is so incredibly important that you do that research.
Yeah, totally jumping ahead, but I love it. I think this is like the point to drive home. That's okay. That's totally okay. This is why you're here, is to give your own perspective and to give the tips along the way. I think it's also helpful, again, just to have it kind of drilled into their heads about what is the importance of this, and specificity is key, right? We don't want those sweeping generalizing statements. You don't need to give the entire history of the issue or the the topic of your research, right? It seems hard that you had such a niche, but I think it was like exactly why you were successful, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think definitely. Honestly, like the timing of what was happening in the world worked out kind of well for me in terms of what I was writing my topic about. And that's another thing we can discuss, knowing that your research is important, not just in general, but maybe to like what is going on in the world right now.
Yes, totally.
I think from a reader perspective, from like the judging perspective, it's always going to be engaging if something is really, really relevant to what's happening in the world. So my proposal was about COVID-19 vaccination access for people experiencing statelessness.
I remember. Yeah.
Which is like really specific, but it was also just really timely and relevant because when I was writing this and submitted it, we were kind of like just getting into the these vaccines, they're really going to happen and they're going to be happening quite like pretty soon discussions in the world. So that worked out for me.
Yeah, and I think for depending on the area of your research, there are ways to bring it to some relevant context, and some might be less obvious than others, right? And not to get too hung up on this, but yes, again, having to state an impact, the so what, right? What is the relevance and kind of what are the stakes of this? This is the slide I was looking for. This is the breakdown, right? So, how do you hit all of these requirements, or how do you achieve, a good overall score when this is the breakdown? Well, it's tough because the research proposal, you can demonstrate it in the CVV, but really that's going to come down to your research proposal, and that's the 30%, right? And then I think you do have an opportunity to add a bit more about academic excellence in maybe 1 or 2 lines tops of the research proposal, but I would say that's it.
Yeah, and I think with the research proposal, because it is so short, I would look at this in kind of like a balanced way. Like, how do you demonstrate through all of these things that you are a good person to do this research?
Yes.
And the thing is, like with academic excellence, your transcripts are what they are. There's really not much you can do about that at this point. So when you're doing your CVV and it talks about personal characteristics and interpersonal skills, you'll have opportunities to highlight like previous research experience or previous like other sorts of nuanced academic experience that you have that maybe like supplements certain things, and you can demonstrate that stuff. It doesn't all have to go in your research proposal. It can go in the CVV, and you can be like, I would be so good at this because I did this other thing and I have experience and that kind of thing. So it's I personally feel it's a bit unfortunate that they weigh the academic excellence so heavily. But just remember, your transcripts are what they are. So really focus on like your proposal and highlighting all your good qualities within your CVV.
Totally. I think that one thing I just want to pause on with the CVV, because I was confused and then you answered my question. So maybe they have the same question, which is on the CVV, and we can look at it more closely after, but there's not really it's not a traditional kind of resume where you would be able to have like the bullet points where you can expand on like, this is the title I had and these are the tasks that I did. So I think, agree or disagree, you have to pick good titles for what you did, right?
That just really about to say that.
Yeah. How about you say
you have to be as like specific as possible in terms of the title to like demonstrate what it is that you did. Like even if that wasn't necessarily your exact official title, unless it was a job. If it was a job, stick with your job title. But if it was like an extracurricular thing or like a research opportunity you had in your undergrad, just even if it makes it really long, be as specific as you can, because there isn't an opportunity to like write bullet points or a small paragraph about what it is you actually did. So in the title, you got to be like super clear about what it is that you were doing.
Yeah, I feel like research assistant just doesn't cut it. Like, especially like I would maybe encourage you, especially if it was like in a field that's relevant, right? Like research assistant in blah, 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 right? Is that possible?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I believe so, to my knowledge, because I remember doing that little stuff.
Yeah.
And being like, oh, I'm going to elaborate a bit here if I can, and try and use up every word, every character that they allow you to use.
Yeah. Squeeze it for all you can. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So this is the research proposal and the purpose. Again, we've kind of gone over this, right? But like, what does it need to accomplish? It needs to show your research, what research you want to conduct in a clear, concise, and engaging way that definitely demonstrates the impact, the so what difference does this make? And also, I think that the thing is not only that it's worthwhile, and it's feasible. Like you can do it, and how will you do it, right? Like what are you going to do? And then what are the steps you're going to take so that this dream research project becomes a reality? And we're going to go over methodology in a bit, but maybe like an example just off the top of my head is, okay, are you doing archival work? Are you conducting interviews, surveys? State that and state why this is the method that you're doing. Is it because it's a new way of conducting the research? If not, is it the traditional way? And then you're trying to find a hole that was, a gap in the research that was previously, not explored, right? So I'm going to leave it there, right? What are the goals of your research itself? And what do you want to accomplish in doing it? Anything? I'm going to ask you every time if there's anything to add, because it's actually so helpful to have you here. So I'm going to take advantage.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll also just preface, well, I guess post-preface everything that I say with the fact that I'm not an expert by any means on this, because
neither am I though. So
I wrote one proposal. So take everything I say with a grain of salt, and if what I say isn't really resonating with you, that's okay. But for me, I wrote my proposal in the third person. So I know when Carly was talking earlier about like maybe write in a few sentences like why you would be a good person. Mm-hmm. I didn't really have the opportunity to do that because of the way I wrote it in a bit of a more formal, like distance from myself way. But what I did do in terms of like demonstrate you have a worthwhile project and that you can do it is I really just focused on the methodology. Mm-hmm. So I took the time to figure out what exactly, like how I wanted to actually do this, and then wrote like quite specifically about what I was going to do. So I wrote that I wanted to have 15 to 20 semi-structured interviews, one-on-one with these people, the object of what these interviews would be, like why I wanted to do them, what I hoped to gain from it. And I even included stuff that I thought just like for me on an ethics basis was important, like about how I was going to protect people's anonymity, how I was going to provide people with, I don't remember what they're called, but usually like if you're doing interviews with people, especially with people in like a vulnerable state, you usually provide something back to them. Whether that's like, there's a more academic word for it than
like a compensation
cash.
sort of. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Or like you need to have, what's the word is like, it will come to me. But like value for them too.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was just important to me because I knew that I was talking about dealing with a very vulnerable population. So I think I also included stuff because it's, you want to try and answer the questions that the judges are going to have. So for me, I was dealing with a vulnerable population and also a population that's extremely difficult to access because these are people who don't really want their status to be known to the world. Like they're not going to come out and be like, oh yeah, I'm stateless, because that involves a lot of issues for people, very personal issues and legal issues. So I did a lot of research into how I was going to gain access to these communities and talked a little bit about that there. Yeah, so in terms of methodology, just I think it's maybe somewhat more important than you might initially think to really go into detail about what you're going to do. But I will also say, don't get too hung up on it.
I was waiting for that.
There's a lot of room for you to change things. Like once you submit this application, you are not committing yourself to doing it as exactly as you've written it. Like I'm about to write my thesis next semester, and I'm in the process of honestly completely changing my topic. So like for me, I get really hung up on like perfecting things and making sure that it's exactly the way I want to do it. But realistically, don't get hung up on the idea that what you write is what you have to do a year later, because there is so much time between when you submit this and when you're probably going to write this paper. So put a lot of thought into it, but don't get hung up on the idea that this has to be like this is written in stone, because it's not. I hope that's not too contradictory.
No, I think what you said is exactly right. It's they want to see that you thought this through enough, but also what they don't know doesn't hurt them, right? About later on, once you have the money, that's yours. Exactly. And you can conduct the research that you see fit. And I think it's sort of natural, like, you know, all of us have written papers before, and you start off with an initial idea about, you know, something you've read, and it shifts and morphs and takes new life depending on what more you learn from it, right? Like the more time you spend with it inevitably changes. And I think that's exactly the point.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is something that we've been talking about sort of throughout, which is the different parts. And as Deirdre mentioned, you know, your research proposal, it can work with these parts in a different order, right? And it doesn't have to follow this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, you know, structure, but it does help to kind of have this as a jumping off point. This is sort of your outline for the research proposal, right? So you will, and again, it will shift depending on, you know, it will be different from one person to the next, what this looks like when it's actually fleshed in, right? I can't say, okay, introduction and background, that's always 3 to 4 sentences. You know, the research topic and specific questions, 3. And then, right, it, because as Deirdre said, like her research methods, that was the biggest part of, not the biggest part, but that was a significant chunk of the proposal, right? So again, this is sort of an outline to help guide you through what the parts of a research proposal are, and just kind of act as a checklist that, okay, I need to have something said about 1, something about 2, etc., right? So that's what I'm going to say here. This is a guide, outline. You're not married to it. You can also, you know, I would say the lit review, that can be in the background, right? It doesn't need to follow this exact order and structure. It's a guide. Anything. It's okay if there's nothing else. So.
Yeah, I would just say, yeah, as Carly said, it can be more fluid than this exact layout. I know for me, in terms of, I did actually follow this quite closely. I have my intro and background, which I would say my advice for that is try and keep it as short as possible, because you're going to want more room to talk about the other stuff.
Yeah.
I actually, like, I still feel my introduction was a bit too long. It was like a paragraph, and I agonized over it because my topic was so specific. I felt that there was like information that was necessary for someone to be able to read it and understand. But I spent a lot of time deleting stuff out of it, like even like little words here and there. And then I did go right to basically my research question. And I flat out said, I was like, the proposed research will examine
yes,
blah, 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 to determine the validity of the following thesis. And I put it in italics to make it extremely clear exactly what question I was asking. And then in terms of objectives and justification, I would just be like justifying this like kind of throughout. So right after I wrote my thesis, I had this little statement. I was like, this is important because blah, 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 just like very succinctly that. And then I do a little literature review, and that's just more, I was talking about like exactly like whose ideology I was going to use to kind of like guide myself through this, and what kind of like research frameworks I wanted to employ to do my research. And then went into methodology, and then contributions and conclusions I also use as kind of like in a justification place, where I specifically said this research aims to fill a gap in XYZ and contribute to blah blah blah, because things are missing. This research is, you want to demonstrate exactly how you are doing research that maybe has never been done before. Nobody's really examined this topic in this way. And it's going to make a contribution to the world of academia, but maybe also like the outside world. I'm reading this back. I'm looking at my proposal right now, and I'm like, this is a bit grandiose. I was like, this research is going to contribute to like helping like comprehensive COVID recovery for Canada. Like, that's
it works
wild,
though.
but
Like
I did
sometimes
it.
it's good to think big, right? Because they want that impact, right? And it's good to think about the contribution in the field, but also the application of that contribution. So yeah, exactly. It's big, but shoot for the moon, right? That expression.
I guess so. It worked out.
One thing I want to flag that it's like awesome you're reading parts of your proposal over, and I just want to draw everyone's attention to it, is how simple and clear the language is, right? This research will do X and it will achieve Y. This is how, right? Like your first draft isn't going to come out like that, and that's totally fine, right? But yes, making it, and even the use of italics, like so brilliant, right? To really draw everyone's attention towards that main question. And then this is a great resource, I think. I used it for the research proposal when I was helping folks, just because, again, it doesn't need to follow this structure, but it gives you the prompts, right? And like Deirdre was just saying, like, I am applying X to support my research on Y, right? It's so simple, it's so clear. And this is one way to do it, and definitely a traditional way to structure the proposal. But again, doesn't need to follow this this format, and it's just one way of thinking about it. And maybe your proposal doesn't follow this format, but maybe this is how you brainstorm your ideas for the proposal, and you kind of rearrange and refit certain parts of the proposal together, right? So maybe you do your research and you're like, okay, I have this introduction to the context, I have the background knowledge, and I have so much in my brainstorming, but then really in the proposal it's going to shrink down to much less, right? But I would use this, again, if you're thinking about the process, use this as an outline, use this as a jumping off point. And again, I would say this idea of the large general topic of wide interest, well, again, you don't need to start there. You could end there, but you definitely need to show what's the point, right? What's the connection? And I don't know that there's much more to say about this piece. other than it's just a way of kind of visualizing it. And then the website where this comes from is linked in the image for you all. And you will all have access to the slides after, as well as the recording. But since you're here, I don't think that's an issue. Okay, and then this was said, but really, these are the questions that you're going to answer, right? If you're doing everything in this slide, you are automatically answering this, right? Who, what, when, where, why, how? Why is the so what, right? And maybe a good exercise for you is just to go when you're in the brainstorming and the rough draft phase, you could just do who, one word, 2 words, what, a couple more words, and then you just string them along into full sentences, right? And then this is something that I wanted to highlight, which is kind of the ways to think about research impact. So you can think about it on the individual level, right? So how will your research impact individuals? How will you as an individual conduct research that is impactful? Like, what do you bring to the research? Maybe you bring some sort of personal experience. It's possible that, is the reason for your interest in the research. And maybe this individual experience is what will lend to more interesting research as well. Again, the methodology we kind of went over, right? The how, what your project is. So I don't know why this is here, but like what is your project? What is the impact of it as a whole? I guess that's the difference, right? What is your individual contribution and impact versus the whole project? And what's kind of, as we've been talking about, the angle that you can work with as an individual or on a project level to show your contribution. And again, the timeline I think is important and falls under methodology, right? So these are all things to consider when you think about impact, right? Yeah, and again, always thinking about if it's feasible, right? I know, again, we want to do everything, but let's show, how, let's show research that can be done as opposed to just doing everything all at once, right? And even if it is kind of a grand idea that you have, bringing it back down to earth at times is necessary to show the feasibility of the project, right? To make it realistic and to make them want to fund you. All good for the next slide?
Fine for me.
Okay. Okay, so these are kind of some tips that I was thinking about, especially in terms of thinking about the audience. So we kind of already mentioned this one, like don't use jargon and acronyms, or if you do use an acronym, define them, because people won't know what you're talking about, right? This is a room of, multidisciplinary scholars. They're in different fields, they're not in your field. So if you have like a key term, you're going to want to define it. If you have an acronym, please define it. And again, as we mentioned earlier, the simpler the language, more clear, probably the stronger your proposal, because isn't there that idea of like, if you can explain something to someone using grade 2 language, then that means that you understand it best yourself, right? I want you to unpack theories or important events. So don't just say like, I'm using this one theory for my critical approach. It's like, okay, well, why? Like, what is the relevance of that to your research? Why do you need to use this one theory? What does this theory contribute to your research? And why can't it be another theory? And again, I'm spitballing all these different questions out there, but it's not always, you're not going to be able to answer every single one, but it's just sort of the idea of pushing your thinking further, right? Don't leave everything don't put just everything at face value, right? I will use this theory. It's like, no, I will use this theory because, and this is why, right? So make use of white space. So this is just a way to like structure it as like in a visual format, right? Like it's not just all one paragraph, right? Like break up the ideas, make them look appealing on the page, not appealing in terms of like font and whatnot. Like there are strict guidelines to follow, but take advantage of the one page and structure it in a way that it's not like one huge paragraph. And again, don't get too hung up on this, but because if you have all the right information in the right place, it will kind of naturally look well structured. And then don't use subtitles. So I believe this is like footnotes aren't allowed, right? Everything you cite has to be cited like directly after, right? There's no footnotes allowed.
Yeah, it's in-text citations and then your like bibliography. And I agree about don't use subtitles. It's honestly just a waste of space.
Yeah. And then that would go against the other
They're gonna know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And it's like, again, make use of the white space, right? So if you use subtitles, it kind of doesn't really work out. Anything else of like do's and don'ts that we haven't already mentioned?
For me, no. I'd say in terms of like jargon and acronyms and being able to like discuss your topic in a way that anybody can understand, have people read your proposal who don't specialize in what you're talking about. And have people read your proposal who maybe aren't usually like they don't exist in an academic setting, maybe it's your parents or something like that. Like my parents don't have like post-secondary degrees, so they don't really exist like in this super academic world. So I wanted them to read it so that they could come back to me and be like, yeah, like I understand what you're talking about, and that made sense. And that's a really good way to get rid of like jargon and stuff that maybe you don't realize is jargon because you use it so commonly and maybe you know it so well that you kind of forget that other people don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, that's it for me.
I think that's great advice. I think also the more people, maybe this one I would take with a big grain of salt, but sometimes the more people you get to read it over, it can be a blessing and a curse, but definitely get folks who are not familiar with your work and like your field to read it over. I think that's really great advice. That kind of I don't want to use the word outsider, but like outside of academia perspective.
Yeah. And I mean, it can be a blessing and a curse, like too many cooks in the kitchen. So just like find a few people who
you trust.
Yeah, who you trust to like give. And it doesn't even need to be like feedback because maybe like they don't specialize in writing research proposals either. Maybe those are just people you go to and you say, can you read this and tell me whether or not you understood what I was saying?
Yeah, that's great advice, is to talk about like, maybe ask the person before they read it, like what specifically do you need from this review, right? Like what are we focusing on? Sentence structure and grammar? Or are we focusing on ideas and the actual material? That's great.
Yeah, sorry, just to add one thing
don't worry.
on it, like looking back, I think I gave mine to maybe like 2 people to read. Well, 3. So in terms of just like the clarity of my work, I gave it to like 2 friends. And then in terms of actually like breaking down, like really critically breaking down the structure and of my proposal, on Carly, you were the only one who did that.
Really? Okay, I feel honored, honestly.
And I found that was useful because it was just everybody has different ideas about how to write and what flows best. So I think if just having me and what I thought was best, and then you and your like perspective that was slightly different than mine was really, really helpful because I took probably like 98% of what you said. And there was just a few things where I was just like, no, I don't think I agree. And I'm being stubborn. But I think if I had like 3 or 4 people,
I'm glad you didn't take all my advice.
More people, then it just gets a bit conflicting because it is like you know how to write, you're a university student.
Yeah.
So just have that one other person that can help you get out that like really structural stuff. And then for your other people, it's just going to be like, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. And I am so happy to be that other person for you folks, as I once was for you. Okay. So this is the information about the bibliography and citations. So as we just mentioned, you have to include in-text citations, but you're going to cite them on a works cited on a bibliography. Let me just, yeah, and then the bibliography, I think, is a really great opportunity to also show how much you know about the field, how much research you've done prior to writing the proposal. So you can, again, include citations that aren't directly cited in your research, right? To show that you have this background knowledge and understanding. And again, yeah, proper format. So like whatever's most commonly used in your discipline in terms of citation style. So, psychology, APA, a lot of the social sciences, APA actually, or Chicago, I guess, depending on which one, humanities, MLA, it really varies, but you should know which one is typically used. And if you don't, there's definitely resources out there. OWL Purdue is like my personal best friend. So it should be yours too. Yeah, and then the idea of like complete citations. So just do them, double check them as well, right? Like you can use, there's so many tools out there for how to do a bibliography, right? So you can even like put your resources that you used into like EasyBib or something like that, and you can double check it, or like cross-reference your citation against theirs, just to make sure it's properly formatted and has all the proper information that you can find. And again, it's only one page, but don't also feel like you have to reference everyone ever, like who's ever talked about this issue. Like that's just not possible. Like, you're really going to have to go with your niche, go with your area and explore that area. But again, there's just not enough room to say, oh my goodness, I've read and I've explored and this is all relevant, because it's not going to be. So I think also being selective about what you include in the bibliography and in the proposal. So especially in the proposal, but also in the bibliography, to be selective.
Yeah, I was going to say on that, in terms of citing like your secondary sources, so things that you didn't directly cite in the proposal, don't go overboard, because I feel like it can be tempting to like fill that page to demonstrate that you've done a lot of research. But I'm looking at it, and my works cited only included 9 sources. I don't know how many of those were in my actual thing, probably only like 4 or 5.
Right.
So it's just a few others, and these were really just things that like guided my proposal. And then also guided like why I was interested in this in the first place, like what theories had I read, or things that I read that made me initially want to look at this more. So those are really like your secondary sources. It's not everything that you've ever looked at that spoke about this topic, because it's also like if someone is looking at your works cited and it's just filled with stuff that's like vaguely relevant, it's not necessarily like a super good look. Like really don't feel that having more sources is automatically better. Like just stick with what works for you. And if it's directly cited in your paper, obviously put it in your work citations. And then if it's like something that you referred to a lot just in your own background research and reading and like your own knowledge on this topic, then include that. But it doesn't have to be everything you've ever read on the subject.
Totally. I agree. Yeah, just what's relevant, what's important, what you're going to potentially use as well, right? Okay, next. So has anyone ever written an abstract for a paper? Sort of like I would call it like yes. How would I describe an abstract? Sort of like an introduction, but with parts of the conclusion, right? So an overview, right, of the paper, or an overview in this case of the research proposal. So a summary really of what your work is. And it's really short, 1,800 characters. What is that, like less than half a page about that?
It's very short.
Yeah.
This was my least favorite part.
Yeah, it's really tough. It's like what lines you cut out, what's necessary. And it has to be written differently, right, than the research proposal, right? As I say here, don't take the first couple of paragraphs from your proposal, like edit it, rearrange it, take what's important, but like you're gonna have to kind of not rewrite it, but massage it, maybe is the right word.
Yeah, I would say this is like the bare bones version of your proposal. This is like, I hate using this, but like the elevator pitch.
Yeah.
Like you have 15 seconds to tell somebody what you're writing about and have it make sense. That's what to me is the hardest part, is that you have to write like 3 lines on your entire research proposal, which was already difficult to fit into 1 page. And then you have to smush it down even more and have it like make at least somewhat sense. So it's like, this is my topic. This is my specific question. This is why it's important.
Yeah, that's it.
Just answer that. Yeah. But also they're going to read your proposal, so don't stress.
Yeah, don't stress. They're not gonna say, okay, I'm tapped out after the summary. They're gonna read the whole thing. Yeah, they have to. Okay, this is the CVV, the CCV, CVC. I was gonna show you folks what it looks like inside. I think that might be helpful. So I'm gonna stop share and then reshare. Where are we? And again, there are instructions. 1 second. Sorry, folks. Okay. Okay. So here we are at the Canadian Common CV portal, and it's confusing because you need a separate account. This isn't the same account as the research portal. You can use the same email and password, but it's separate. It's like they don't talk to each other, the systems, which is like really frustrating.
Yeah, I think they developed it in the 90s and then just said, okay, good enough.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm gonna log in, and again, I'm just gonna show you. So you have to select which one you're doing. So it's this, but sorry, I do this wrong every time because it's not straightforward. I've already clicked that. So where is it? I go to my CV here, right? Funding. And then you click the source from which you go. Yeah.
This is actually a bit confusing.
It's a bit confusing. Yeah.
Personally, I found it confusing. I remember consulting with a friend who was also doing the application at the same time. I was like,
right.
I don't know, which one do I have to? So don't be afraid to like ask a bunch of people. Like if you have other people who are doing this, like make sure, like confirm with them that you've got the right CV, because it's not the most user-friendly application.
Yeah, it's not user-friendly at all. I totally mentioned that in the last workshop. But again, it's not user-friendly, but then you kind of get in here and you're like, okay, I kind of see what's going on. And it's just really going line by line, kind of similarly. Okay, now you guys know where I live. But I was just testing it out. Like, I'm going to delete this, but how do you go through it? Like, what do you put in, add? And it just takes time, right? Done. And then I'm going to go back, but I'm just going to go like that and see if it works. Yeah, it doesn't. I had a feeling that wouldn't work.
Press done and then it'll take you back.
Done. Yeah. See, it's kind of just like a trial and error sort of situation.
Yeah.
I found.
Yeah. I would say just do your CVV or CCV or whatever it's called. Just do it early, because it's like, it's not hard. It's just annoying.
It's just super tedious.
Yeah. But it's like all of this information you already know about yourself. It's like, where did you work? What are your extracurriculars? What's your address?
Yes, exactly.
So it's probably one of the easier parts of the application. It's just, yeah, it's just tedious.
And one thing that I would mention is to definitely save it after every time that you work on it. So I'm just going to go here and click the little edit. I'm just going to, so you see like how you could add whatever, done. Now we know done brings us back, done. Okay, perfect. It's double done. Okay. But then there's the part where you can preview it and it downloads it for you. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. And it's going to look like nothing for me now, but I would click done and download it every time. Or do you think that's paranoid behavior? I don't know. I would personally be paranoid, but
I don't think I did. I think I just saved it.
But definitely save, but then I just want to show you, I mean, it won't look like much for me right now, but if I share my screen, it will come into PDF format, right? And then all of your information will be here, right? And it will be longer than 2 pages, and you'll be able to go through each
a bit
part, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The only thing I'll really say actually more about the CCV is when you're doing it online, there's like a whole list, like we saw Carly scrolling through, there's like a whole list of things. There'll be ones that are like mandatory for you to fill out, and then a bunch of ones that are essentially optional. It's really intimidating because there's all of these things, and a lot of it, I was looking at this and I was like, I've never done any of this. So it's important to know that it's the same CCV platform that they use for the doctoral candidates.
Yes.
So these are people who are like way ahead in life and research and have done other stuff. So it's like, it's asking for like magazine entries and
they use this for
articles.
Sorry, I just want to say that not only the doctoral students, they use it for faculty as well.
Oh, great. There you go.
It's for all academics. So yeah, don't feel bad about yourself.
Don't feel that you need to fill something into everything. Like literally just look for the things that apply to stuff you've done and fill them out, and don't stress about it, because you are like competing. I don't even like the word competing, but you're applying against other people that are your age and have the same level of education as you. So they just have all these categories, and it looks really intimidating and stressful, but it's not a big deal.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay, I'm resharing this. And again, there's instructions about, if you're getting kind of confused and disoriented, like in the actual portal itself, there are step-by-step instructions, right? Like you folks so rightly asked me, oh, where do you get the pin from? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's go look where you get the pin from. So it's when you submit it. Now we all know. And it took you through the step-by-step, right? Before you submit. And again, it's kind of just like any bad video game. Like you just have to play around with it and see where it goes, right? And again, trial and error a little bit. Managing references. So I showed you that you have to email the references so that they get wind of it themselves, and they get like a pin or something to then submit the application through the portal. Like they do it so that you can't see the application itself. So tell them to check their spam folder for the invitation. I'll show you what it looks like. And then, yeah, just remind them about the actual form, right? So check your spam, remind them. You're kind of like managing, like really the word managing your references. Like they're going to come through for you, but they're not going to do it without any guidance or a bit of, dare I say the word, nagging. Or just like kind reminders, right? So you're going to be on top of them for this work. And I think one thing that I mentioned in the last workshop that I want to say again is for the references, it's a great idea to sit down with your reference and have a short little like 15-minute meeting with them where you say, this is what I want to do. This is why I'm thinking about applying for the CGSM, or why I'm applying to grad school in general. These are my goals. This is a bit about what I've done. And then will you be my reference right? It shows that you care. It shows you've done your work. It shows you've done your research. So yeah, just have that open conversation with them. And references, they're willing to help. They're used to doing this work, right? Faculty members, this is kind of part of their job. Yeah.
Yes, actually, it's part of their job. I always would feel like so bad asking people for references, but it is literally part of their job. Like, it is actually part of their job requirements. So don't feel bad asking for a reference, because like it is quite literally part of their job, especially if they're full-time profs. It's like they do actually get paid to do that. So
exactly. Yeah. And yeah, submitting on time, I would just get your references, submit before the deadline. Don't wait. I think I mentioned that the portal gets kind of clogged up and busy and slow. As you can see, it's a archaic system and portal. So let's get it in early.
I have a fun anecdote.
Yeah.
It is genuinely extremely true. Don't try and submit the day of. What happened with me, it's funny now because it worked out. It was actually devastating at the time. Basically, one of my references, I had a very horrible family situation happen to them where like they had like 2 deaths and the like very close people in their family died within like 2 days of this deadline. So they're actually only able to submit like a few hours or like an hour before the deadline. And then when you go to submit, you have to like download. It's like a bit of a process. And basically, even though it was like full hour before the deadline, I actually missed the deadline. And it was this whole thing. It ended up working out okay. I emailed somebody at CGS. I just emailed the contact and I was like, this is what just happened. It was so out of my hands and so out of their hands. Like, is there any way that you'll accept it? And they actually did. Like 2 weeks later, they got back to me and they did accept my thing. So obviously now it's all worked out and it's fine. But genuinely tell your references the deadline is like 2 days before it actually is.
Yes.
Do send them reminder emails. If they've agreed to be your reference, be like, okay, great, I'm inputting your email. You should get an email about this within X amount of time. After that amount of time has passed, email them again and say, hey, just checking to make sure that you got it. Like, just want to make sure I don't have to, like, just be really polite. And then send them reminder emails. Be like, oh yeah, just by the way, like the deadline's coming up. Just want to like bring this to the top of your inbox. Just want to flag this for you. Like, just be super polite, but do send reminders. Don't feel bad about that because they are busy people. And yeah, you want to get it done a day or two before, honestly.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. Okay, next. Oh, this is just what it looks like when you receive the email. See, like this could so easily be mistaken as spam. That's really the point of this slide. Yeah, just to show you. And it did come actually to my main inbox, so I was pleased, but you never know what kind of restrictions or security that folks have on their email. Okay, and then we're here, but this has sort of been going on the whole time. And I'm sorry I didn't give you your proper introduction right at the get-go, but if you want to say a bit about yourself, I mean, Deirdre was a recipient of the CGSM, as has been made obvious to you folks throughout this presentation. But if there's anything now that you want to ask, any of your burning questions, things we didn't cover, now's your time. Feel free to put it in the chat. Feel free to shout it out by unmuting yourselves. And hopefully I can answer some questions too, but really we have this special guest of honor, so let's take advantage. All the way from France also, might I add. Are there any questions, folks? Yeah, Jenny.
Hi, yeah, I'm just curious, when, like in terms of timeline, you decided what you wanted your research proposal to be and sort of how much time it sort of took you to develop that as an idea, and then how long it took you to then develop it into your proposal.
So I'll just say that I'll tell you, but I wouldn't use this as what to do. So for me, like applying to CGSM, the whole like 50% academic weighting thing was actually quite dissuasive for me. And when I did ultimately decide to apply, I like really did not believe that I would get it. I was just like, oh, this would be a really good opportunity. I've never done a research proposal before. I might as well, like I really have nothing to lose. I mean, other than my time, but whatever. So I actually ended up writing the proposal itself because I had made an appointment with Carly to discuss it. So I actually like wrote it like the day before. And it was just because I knew the topic really well. Like it's something that I'm like extremely interested in. So I had done like a bit of background research and whatnot. But I wrote like my first draft of it basically the day I had a meeting with Carly, which is slightly embarrassing.
It's kind of awesome.
But she was really, really kind and offered to have like a second meeting with me, like I think a week or two later. Because I was like, this, like, she was just giving me such good information. And I was like, it would be so great if I could, you know, take this all back and actually, you know, spend a bit more time on this. Yeah. So I think in terms of writing the research proposal, like a lot of it is just like figuring out what you want to do. For me, after I figured out exactly like what was the question I wanted to ask, things kind of fell together fairly quickly because I was familiar with the background, and my topic was very specific. It was a really narrowed down topic, so it wasn't too much that I had to research. In terms of timelines, I have the world's worst memory, but I think I was writing all of this in like late October, early November. So I probably started about now, like when we had this same workshop last fall, and I started writing it. And then it was just going through, like once you have your first draft, and then you get all of Carly's amazing critiques, then you work those in. And I remember I also gave it to one of my referees, like the person who I'd also asked to be my supervisor. I gave it to him and he gave me some good feedback.
That's something I would definitely encourage you folks to do. Sorry, just to flag, like I'm here to help, but your referee and your supervisor, like they really want you to succeed, and their feedback's also really valuable because they have a perspective that I don't. I'm kind of more of that I don't know what you're talking about person. Like I do have somewhat of an academic background, but they really do. So maybe if you're struggling with the actual content, they're a good person to go to. But for me, I can help more with like structure and actual grammar and like the construction of the proposal.
They're really helpful because they do have that like academic background where these are people that have applied for stuff exactly like this and other types of research grants. So they really do know what they're talking about. I would say, like honestly, writing the research proposal itself, because it is so short, I don't think it takes that much time. It's just like, just really give yourself enough time. Like you don't want to be doing this the week before it's due. Like you want to give yourself enough time that you get down your rough draft and then you work on it with Carly and your supervisor and, you know, these other people that you trust to read your stuff. And you have enough time to just like really edit it down to be exactly what you want it to be over the course of like maybe 3 or 4 weeks. And that's not you're working on it every single day, every single hour. It's just like a few hours here and there dedicated to doing this. And I think is what I did. But it really depends on like how much you already know about the topic.
That's what I was gonna say.
So you do want to do research and figure out something specific that you want to study and you care about. And
I think that's actually the huge thing that I put a giant asterisk beside, is that you already knew a lot about your topic and you were like very interested and you had that background knowledge. And I think that's actually really helpful, because if you don't have that grounding, and it's okay if you don't, you just have to start earlier. That's all. Like start now. If it's about coming up with a topic and really delving into what you're interested in, because you can't find your gap and your niche without having that background, right? You can't figure out what you're going to propose without that firm firm background knowledge, right?
Yeah. And I will say my roommate at the time, she was writing this proposal as well for different schools, but and that was more the situation for her where she didn't know exactly, like she kind of had a vague idea of like the subject that she wanted to write about, but she didn't know exactly about it. And it's also like, it's not just a topic, but it's like a location. Like it's when you write a paper and your prof is like, oh, it's not specific enough because you want to have like a topic and like where is it happening and where are you studying it? So like mine happened to be in Canada. It's not anymore because I've moved to France. But yeah, so she spent like quite a bit of time, like a few afternoons, definitely, over the course of probably a month, like probably like 4 to 6 hours a week, I would say, doing like her research and stuff before coming up with like her proposal. That's a ballpark just based on when I knew she was studying. So if that's helpful.
And I think one thing I'll say is just about your roommate, that's interesting to note is, you know, even if you don't have such a good idea of the topic or the area that you want to explore, doing this research now and kind of going through this process will be so helpful for your degree. Like it will, you know, pique your interest in an area. It will make you a stronger researcher, right? So it's not all for nothing if you don't get the award or if you don't even know the exact niche or topic that you have, you know, an interest in, right? You're kind of just flexing your research skills and getting more in-depth knowledge about the field in general, or like a particular area of the field that you're already kind of interested in.
Yeah, and our even like our general timelines for our degrees were different because I was doing this application like in my first year of my master's, whereas she was applying to this like CGSM while also applying to her like several master's degrees. So it was even just like I had already been in school, well, I guess for only half a year, but even having that kind of time to like something's going to pique your interest in a class one day or a discussion one day and you're going to realize you're obsessed with it. Well, that's what happened to me. So yeah, don't stress too much if you don't know exactly what you want to talk about. Like just find something that interests you and dig deeper into it and just do a big old literature review.
Yeah.
You're going to have to do it anyway.
Are there any other questions? Oh, I see the chat has been lit up. Out of curiosity,
I believe you can write it in French.
Yes, you can.
Because it is French. Like obviously bilingual country, bilingual applicant. Yeah, I think you can fully write it in French.
So not to worry. I can still try to help you with the French, but in terms of like grammar and stuff, that's not my forte in French. But for structure and content, I think I'm still capable of helping.
And then I don't know if you're already a York student, but I would say if you're looking specifically for help with French, maybe turn to a prof that you know. I don't know if you've had like a research methods course maybe in French. I know last year we had, I mean, I'm in Glendon in the MPIA, but we had a really great research methods class with a prof named Elaine Coburn. And I mean, if I was in your situation, that's immediately who I would turn to because she is a research methods prof and she speaks French. It was a French class. So yeah, just find someone who maybe specializes in not necessarily your area of research, but the area of how to research things, who does speak French or like knows French grammar better, I guess.
There's also, this is a really great point, and I'm just going to fast forward sort of to the end quickly, but I have a lot of resources here, right? Resources that are online about writing the research proposal. All the U Ottawa resources are bilingual. And then these guides that are Passport York protected, unfortunately, they're only in English, but then also, I didn't include them in this slide. I can, but they're in the other slides that you folks should have, which is the Career Skills Development Center at Glendon. That is a bilingual website. did I not put it in here? I'm so sorry. And that's a great resource in terms of just their online content, and they offer appointments too to go over other elements of, you know, a grad studies application. If you are in that situation where you're in the last few years of your undergrad and you're applying to graduate school and you're not already admitted, they can help you with that as well. I'm happy to help out in some places where possible, but they're really great with that too. I see. Okay, amazing. You can ask your prof from France. That's a great idea. Yeah, definitely use the resources that are available to you. And again, as we said earlier, reference letters are part of the prof's job, and helping students apply for grad school is actually kind of part of their job too. It's maybe not as obvious and explicit to you, but they should be happy to help. And then one thing I just want to flag, sorry, there are other opportunities besides the CGSM and the OGS, right? Like these are two opportunities, but I want to make sure that folks know about the Glendon Academic Excellence Scholarship, as well as others, which is a new scholarship opportunity for students, undergraduate students. And there are other options available as well, you know, internally at York, and then, you know, for international students as well. These are all just links that I would encourage you to look at in your own time to learn more about them.
Yeah. And then also, because I know you can apply to like one or the other or both. If you're applying for CGS, apply for OGS, because it's just the extra click of a button. If you're applying for OGS separately, it is a separate application process. But if you're applying for CGS, don't not apply for OGS.
It's also like all the same parts. Yeah.
It is. It's the same. You're submitting one application just to CGS. It's just that you're also being considered for OGS. Because I got OGS as well, but then they can't give it to me, obviously. But yeah, so do that. And especially if you're going into your first year, because you can get OGS or CGS 1 year, and then the next you can get something different. You can't hold the same one more than once, but yeah, I wish I'd applied for this in my going into my first year, just because why not? I just didn't know it was a thing and I missed the deadline.
Are there any other questions? Anything at all? No. How's everyone feeling about all this information? I don't want to continue to overload you folks, and it's already been an hour and a half. I know we allocated 2 hours for this, but I don't know that doing these activities is really the best use of our time. It's very, I think we've given you a lot of information already, and I would kind of want this to percolate, but I can always, you know, you're going to get these slides anyway. And I can always, you know, this research proposal, this sample of a research proposal, as well as this one, they are available online through Carleton. I can also attach them to the email that I'll send out afterwards for you to look at, just kind of examples. And really what I was going to do with you folks is really simple, and I'm sure you can do it on your own, is just identify the different parts of the research proposal, right? What are they doing? You know, how are they structuring it? Where's the information coming from? Where's the introduction? Where's the context? How are they establishing the field? And you're going to see in these two examples, they're for 2 different disciplines. They're done in such different ways. And even regardless of the discipline, they can be done in different ways as well. That's sort of what I wanted to just flag for you all.
I think that's something really important to note, because I remember writing mine and reading a few past proposals that I managed to get my hands on, like winning proposals.
Yeah.
I don't remember how, so I can't help with that. But basically what I noticed is that they're all very different. Like they have basically the same information, but the way that they're written, whether it's first person or third person or whatever, was very different. So what I took from that is that don't try to mimic any proposal that you see. Just know what you need to include, and don't be concerned that you're writing it wrong because it's not the way that you saw somebody else write theirs. Because from what I've seen, every winning proposal is like, is different.
Totally. Yeah. That's kind of the exact point of this exercise. And just to also get you folks comfortable with noticing the different parts and kind of thinking about, okay, how am I going to get the proper information, right? It's not necessarily about how you will convey it, but kind of going back actually to Jenny's question about like, yeah, how is it that I'm going to approach this? What's the first step? And I think the first step is, yeah, just researching on your own. And then the rest will kind of start to fall into place, especially if you use the outline and read past examples as well. I'm going to ask again, though, if there are any other questions. Yeah, Jenny.
Sorry, just one more.
That's right.
Did you know that you would be going to York? Like, did you know that you had been accepted to York when you applied for the CGSM, or it's sort of you do the CGSM, but you don't apply to the program until later?
So I was already in my first year when I applied.
Okay. I see.
Because you can, and that I think is like a weird part of this, isn't it? I know it's because the process is so long for them to like judge them and pick them. But so my roommate at the time who was writing the proposal as well, she was, I think basically you have to write, like you have to submit the proposal for each school that you are planning to apply to. So it is just a bit more work for me. I mean, I only applied to Glendon for my master's, so it wouldn't have been a lot of work for me, but I was already a Glendon student when I applied. So it was very straightforward because I was just applying to this one school. But yeah, if you are doing it kind of, it's actually like it's before really you start writing your grad school application, because grad school applications are usually like March or April or something.
Right, okay, yeah.
But this is December. So you do just have to write, I mean, it can be the exact same proposal, or just like shifted slightly based on like what program you're applying to and like what kind of like discipline it is exactly that you want to be studying there. But yeah, for me, it was quite straightforward.
Yeah, Jenny, that's such a good question. And something that we talked about last time is how the timelines are kind of messed up, right? Like the OGS and CGSM deadline is before a lot of the grad school application deadlines. But the thing is, if you have your information for the OGS and CGS ready for the deadline, you will be super prepared and can even refine and rework the information for the actual grad school deadline. So you're doing more work, but it's in advance of the deadline. So then hopefully you can refine it and rework it. And especially if it's a 2-year master's, you know, you can always apply if you don't get it in the second year in your first year of the master's, but for the second year, right?
Yeah. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? If not, I'm going to, conclude the session and thank you all for coming and thank our guest of honor, again and again and again for being such a great reference and being able to sort of just reinforce a lot of the ideas that, seem like, very obvious, I guess. But with your personal experience, it adds that level of, expertise, I would say, without using that word, because we said we weren't going to use it. But no, I so appreciate you being here and appreciate all of you for coming. And hopefully you learned something. And if you're interested in pursuing this process and working with me on your proposal and need help with next steps, feel free to reach out. I'm going to send up like a doodle poll for registration with me in the coming weeks. And if you want to email me, I can drop my email in the chat, which I'm doing right now. And feel free to ask.
Just to quickly end off.
Yeah.
My biggest piece of advice is to meet with Carly. Because
I don't like that.
No, honestly, genuinely, my proposal was so much better because of like the advice that she gave me. Like genuinely so much better. Like she gave me a lot more direction in terms of what I was writing about, and like really helped me narrow stuff down. It was genuinely like your help was game changing. So
oh my goodness.
take advantage of Carly.
Okay, I don't know how I feel about that advice. So we said to take things with a grain of salt. So there we are, taking it with a large grain of salt. So I'm gonna stop sharing and let you folks. I'm gonna stop recording also, and